Good Friday meditation.
It was now about noon, and darkness came over the whole land until
I used to think, well, there's no point in dwelling in that pain and that grief because it won't change anything.
I'm Sally Vickers, and with the help of readings by Samuel West, I'll be weaving together people's stories of personal darkness and their coming to terms with loss.
But the strange reality is that by going into it, really feeling it and accepting it, new life and resurrection comes out of that.
Good Friday meditation at 3 o'clock.
I've got the apple in me, original cinnamon style. I'm gonna be fighting night and day to keep you at your distance. We can discuss the menu.
Righty-ho, this is going to be a bit of a mess. I can't edit. Now, I'm going to do a very rare little bit of editing, only because, and literally this is a one-off. This is like once in 3 years. I'm able, first thing this morning, to use somebody's plug quietly with nobody around. That was, well, we started there with an excerpt of, if you're listening in America, many middle-class people, including government, people of power, listen to Radio 4, which is our version of PBS. And then we had my very favourite song of the whole of my 20s, The Roaches' This Feminine Position. I'll come back to that in a moment. If you are listening to this on Substack, we have a little problem. Now, I happen to be at my best when I'm rambling along, walking, waffling. But I don't have time to edit, and I certainly don't have time to pre-plan or say nice things. I shall come back to that also in a minute. But Substack has gone and put a new terms and conditions, or rather just system in, whereby if your audio is longer than 1 hour and you've only got 6 subscribers, I think, you can't upload something. So yesterday morning I attempted to load a 2-hour thing. This is part 1. If you're listening on Substack, this is part 1. You'll have to go to part 2, which is the real meat of this, which is everything can always be found on ralphskism.com, and usually I don't even know if Substack puts a date, I'm sure it does put a date and time of publication, generally within a few hours, because I can say quite sincerely, full-time on the job. What's the job? I'll come back to that. Right. Let me just see if I remember what I wish to say into this introduction. that is a song. This feminine position is a song with a story. And I still don't know what the story is. It is a superb, it is one of the greatest pieces of writing I know. It is also, it doesn't tell you what to think. That's the important thing. I first heard that, I think, when I was about 23. Yes, I can remember, because a few months later, I met a woman who was the most important woman in my 20s, and I still remember now. Sat outside her, where she lived, for our first proper date, and I had that on. I played that a few times, and I was in a kind of ecstasy of complete and utter bliss. Horrible word, but let's just use it temporarily. True, wonderful love, and that was the song song that I would. Actually, it wasn't about her, because she was a very straightforward woman. Anyway, I think the most important, well, I hadn't even thought before turning that song on. There are two words there, fight and men. Okay, I'm playing with words, but the men you. But let's keep it for this to the men you. I know that this is this business of looking for inner peace, all of this. Now, gradually over the last 20 years, but particularly the last 10 or 15, it is overwhelmed. That's the wrong word. It is entirely it's descended from God only knows where, as unless you are seen to be going through meditations, quiet moments of reflection, you're not quite adequate, or you're in fact even potentially a dangerous person. You're not a person who has safe peace inside of you. Now, you'll have to listen to part 2 of this, but one thing I know for certain is that that's not true. It's almost the exact other way around. If I remember, I just want to keep to these two words, fight and menu. Well, let's deal with menu. So many times the last 5 or 10 years. Now, five years ago, especially, which is your pandemic. I say your pandemic. I lived in a region where very sparsely populated, and the weather was absolutely glorious, and most people were really stuck and fearful and frightened. I happened to be lucky in that I'd already had a couple of years, or 3 or 4 years prior to that, I'd had a couple of years of absolute existential threat due to a completely random, probably black mold in a very old place I lived in, had degraded my system, and various things started to damage me. Right, okay, to keep to the point. So I was on my rebirth. I was in late 2018, I got to the point myself where, God, every day's a bonus. I started to get completely better. By the way, please note, I never told anybody over 2.5 years of really being in a pretty bad way. 2 winters living in the coldest, dampest property you could ever imagine. It was actually famous. My hovel, my part of an old fallen down once stately home, which was just a cheap rental, was famously the one which was the coldest and dampest, and people didn't last there very long. Right, I have to so quickly do this. Yeah, I'd come back to life. fully and health after the most nothing to do with me, literally nothing to do with me, but the most soul destroying March to June 2018 one could imagine. The story is in video clips, July 2023 on Ralph's Schism. Shame. Not deserved shame, I should add, and 3 magistrates immediately said so, that I was somebody who should never have been an action against me, which it's not difficult to talk about these things, because if you were there, it was an extraordinary experience, June 2018, to see some magistrates basically say, no, you come into this courtroom, don't go into the dock, because you are not, essentially, your summons is cancelled. It should never have happened. The most embarrassing, horrible, just somebody trying to ruin my life once again. My life, basically, let's keep to the point now. That song. That was the song of my 20s. Oh, there was plenty of great heavy metal in there as well. But I was somebody in my 20s who very much sought inner peace. And I travelled the world, and I never found it. I slightly found it at times and had lovely periods, but I never had inner peace. It just so happened that randomly, when I was 30, I had a friend and a friend of a friend had some children, and I fell in love with her children and spent a couple of years being her equal, unfortunately only brother and sister relationship, but the most intimate possible brother and sister relationship, without breaking any incest laws, entirely her equal, looking after her children. That we can call purpose. Now, why do I put that in? Because what have we got in society? I'm not too sure about America, but Britain, all you ever hear is younger people are in a mess, and that is true. It's not something made up in the media. In the last few months, 6 months, we've had some of the most disturbing, terrible children, 14, 15-year-olds, stabbing, killing other people. Now, extreme cases never make good law, meaning extreme situations never make good social policy or good philosophy. Let's just keep it to that word. As I say, what do we have? It astonishes me, actually, how it's taken over in the last 10 or 15 years. Ordinary people. Now, I met a truly magnificent young woman in her van. I wasn't going to put her in, but I don't name or identify anyone. I don't identify any place, because people are cautious. They don't like to share of themselves. I didn't like to share of myself in my 20s. I knew it was the key to life. I knew being totally open about everything was the key, one terribly important key to inner peace, because you have to spend so much energy holding things in. Anyway, I met a magnificent woman. I'm only going to drop this in because she was so wonderfully balanced. We were talking about her transition into being into her own space in her van, which was just great. Now, she was a very intelligent artist. In fact, she was talking about applying for a research grant. It was either for a PhD or a master's, an aspect of art, which was very, very thrilling. I got a wonderful email from her a couple of days ago where she was telling me, now this is important, but no disrespect to her if she listens to this. The exact opposite. She was querying that she had actually been to some Buddhist retreat centre, I think it was in the Alps, and she sort of felt it was all rather, to some extent, hypocritical. I don't want to misquote her. She's so smart, she would pick me up on it. And it was so wonderful to read that. I don't read many things that I think just, wow, no, it was so wonderful to read it because now no one wants to dig at any particular meditation or mindfulness or Buddhist practice. But I kind of have known for 30 years that there's something flawed in that whole approach. Now, that sounds like, oh, I'm going to give you some magical, well, first of all, I'm going to attack specific people. No, I actually pity people. Let me just quickly, I'm going to try and keep this to 30 minutes. The last week or two, actually slightly inspired by her and somebody, in fact, two women, middle-aged women, who know that they must try and guide, influence, or just say something more intelligent about the environment. And let's be crystal clear, the environment across the world. When I was aged 26 or 27, I was given the perfect, I applied for and got the perfect job that everybody in the world would die for. To fly a small 10-seater aircraft called an Islander, basically a bloody tractor with wings, based on the West Indian island of St. Kitty, St. Christopher. When I took that job, I already knew I just was so inside of me, so unhappy. But here's the point. Forget that. Just walking along the windward side, the side of the island which gets the wind, it was the wind on that island came from the east. Even then, the plastic, there was a 20 to 30 mile an hour wind on average. Very few people use that side for two reasons. Firstly, the wind, but it was a massive long beach. The plastic was piled up 6 inches deep in many places. It was absolutely heartbreaking. Right, let's get back into the point of this. Menu. I know that you cannot get in a piece off a menu. Now, that's what I've seen arise in the last 10 or 15 years. All of the mindfulness, Buddhist, I encountered people who were, of course, practicing Buddhism. Let's just keep it to meditation. Now, I open this saying, this would be better if I was ad motion and I was on a walk where I would say, I can go into pretty meditative states. But let's be crystal clear, it is not a Om kind of meditation. It is a meditative state of bounce that implies something not very nice. No, it's just, wow, I can still power myself up that really steep bit in front of me and keep going. And as you are putting the energy into it, as you're putting your body into it, it's quite simple, I would say. I've had the most terrible 3-ish periods of life imaginable. I'll come back to that in a moment. But you go out for a walk. Oh, good, I've remembered something. You go out for a walk, and one thing's for certain, you never come back after a walk, no matter how awful you're feeling worse. That's a fact. That's one of the very few facts I know. Now, of course, that's not inclusive in that there are some people who can't walk for whatever reason. All I know is if we want a better world for them, those of us who can, the great majority, well, walking is a wonderful thing, but there is something much more fundamental. On the introduction to this video and the next one, there's a photograph of a swan, a female swan. Now, my walk would be, that's from 2019. No, it's not, it's from 2021. there's a swan that was probably got by a fox, and some eggs next to it. That photograph to me, well, apart from, I have many photographs and bits of film, I've put them up occasionally, and I will remember, probably not yet, to put the film of that swan up in a post with this. I lived in this magnificent, well, it wasn't magnificent, it was a complete hovel, actually, and unfortunately the people around were very dysfunctional, but it was somewhere hidden away in the hills that the rentals were cheap or cheaper. So people at the bottom of society lived there, and there were a few people, men, stuck on drugs or drink. One of them would never come out during the day. It was kind of a bit scary. And there was one good thing, though. Well, there were two good things. First of all, no one really talked to each other very much. They just lived in their own atomized hole. And for me, if I walked 20 metres up a track that went from my back door of my yard, I would be in the open countryside and wouldn't see another person. Literally. So I would walk up from this old place called Awood, up one field, and then into a field, into a small valley called Sheep Walk. Sheep Walk would go up this valley. Now, this valley was the most extraordinary place, actually, I've known possibly in my life walking in Britain. There's a stream going down this valley, a high up valley, hidden away. There was only one property in it, called Kennel Cottage, where the people that owned it basically only spent 1 month a year there, and it was a few years before I did encounter them once, and they were okay actually. In fact, they'd been born there, mainly not born, but they'd had it. They were in their 60s. They'd had it. A brother and sister had had it from when they were very young. So it was basically a deserted valley, and there were 3 lakes in that valley, one after another. Now, the year before 2018, there'd been some otters, and I knew that the farmers around, or not really around there, but a bit further downstream, would kill those otters because they had a large fishing operation, and the people who paid to go fishing, it's called syndication, who paid, I think there were about 15 of them, 10 or 15, they paid £650 a year at this great big fishing area, and they were building an otter fence. Now, an otter fence is very expensive because the otter would go and kill the fish in that large lake. I must remember to come back to the bird. Otter fences are very expensive. About halfway through building it, they stopped building it. Guess why? Now, had I even said a word of this at that time, I would have been hurt. The landowner was the most horrible, aggressive man. I kind of knew him. I couldn't help encountering him sometimes. Anyway, so there was some otters in the middle pond. Was it the middle one? No, the bottom one, which was the lovely large one. I saw them one day. I was like hurt, bereft, and I saw them one day. Straight away went into overdrive. Wow. Okay, they're going to get. It looked like I don't even know if there were 2. I saw one for certain. It was around during the day for a minute or 2, swimming around, and I just had the impression there was another one there. I knew they'd be under danger because I knew. I found out a few days later there was a track from that pond down the stream. You could see where they'd been going up and down to the much larger pond, a couple of kilometres downstream where the fishing was. Because otters have a very wide-ranging territory. I knew that those otters would be killed. I had found a dead otter about 3 or 4 years earlier, thrown into a field. Now, somebody would say, oh, it got hit by a car, but no. I've got photographs of it. No, somebody would have killed that. So I went into overdrive, but I couldn't say a word to anybody locally. I had a friend woman, well, not really a friend, but I'd known her for 35 years, who named her sons after otters and yeah, come on, can you come? We've got to get some film of these. We've got to establish that they're there over a few days. Then maybe we can apply for some funding and rent this pool. It would have been possible to do this, and even fence it off and keep them here as sanctuary, because otherwise they're going to get killed. So I spent 3 or 4 weeks trying to do that, and nobody would ever do anything. They were killed. I know that. One night somebody would have come, a friend of a friend, wouldn't have been the farmer himself, but somebody would have said something in a local pub. Oh, do you want to earn 500 quid? Go out lamping at after dark, and because you could see where the otters would go down a big field, right? Nobody ever helps. To the picture of the swan. Now, in 2020, I've written about it quite extensively, actually. In 2020, in the same valley, a huge, massive badger set was there, up in the hills, a sanctuary set, and an environmentalist, somebody who actually was paid to look after the environment. Well, we say that. He was an officer of Herefordshire Council. I knew them well. Owned 80 acres, Kennelwood. Now, I would call myself a kind of unofficial steward of that whole area. So I'd be walking a 2 to 3 hour walk up to Herrick Hill, up Sheepwalk Valley. I call Herrick Hill my kind of healing hill, but I never use that word. 2020, up on the side of that valley, Kennel Wood, 80 acres. They were felling 40 acres for money, and I'd be walking past it as I would, July 2020, and astonishing. I saw them start to fell the timber on the wood, and right at the top corner, in a completely barren area, no trees, was this massive badger set that had only been there a few years, and I was literally the only person who knew that was there. I can do kind of rudimentary animal tracking, and I knew that was the case. There were cubs in there, and I was astonished to see that I would walk past saying, no, you're not going to do it. You're not surely going to. No, you're going to leave that. These people, the owners of that land, even would man the Extinction Rebellion stall in the local small market town. No, you're not going to. You're going to leave that badger set alone. It's illegal to even piss within 5 meters of a badger set. Anyway, they bulldozed it. One morning I walked up, they bulldozed it. The holes were filled in, the cubs buried alive. I have a recording of the owner of the land, actually, about a month later. I dared to refer to it because I would have got hurt by the contractors. That's a very illegal act, and I do have film, not actually of it happening, but very close afterwards. Let's come to the swan. The swan. So a year later, now, wild swans are kind of slightly under threat. So a year later, I saw May 2021. Because this was still, the carnage of the apocalypse, the Holocaust of killing badgers. And it's amazing how the ground starts to, the flowers grow back quickly. Anyway, 2021, there's a swan who's nesting on the lower pool, and I've got film and photographs of it. I was like, wow, great, because they don't do it very long. And in the lower pools, there's 2 or 3 pools. There's one called, the main one was Garden Pool, where they used to nest. And kids had unfortunately, seemingly, killed with air guns or something, cygnets the year before or 2 years before. Unfortunately, there were no cygnets for a couple of years. So, hidden away up in the hills, on the lower pool of Sheep Walk, which is the most extraordinarily beautiful, hidden, quiet, silent valley, just nature. There is this female swan. She's on her nest. I'd seen her hidden away. I got photograph and film, and it's like, God, there's hope. There's hope. Anyway, a few weeks later, I'm walking, and I see this area of feathers in a field, and oh shit, something's had her. Now, here's the point. So straight away, I went to look to see if the eggs are still there. Yes, the eggs were still there. And I went into overdrive of, now, obviously, if I'm somebody very focused on nature, which I always have been, I'm the only person who's ever handed back a commercial pilot's license because it wasn't compatible with my daughter's future, in which I did in 1998. Essentially, I never flew a plane after that, after she was, about 3 or 4 months old, in a belly, a fetus. Right, good for me. Aren't I full of piety? No, it was hard. Anyway, to the point. So, those eggs, you can see there's 4 eggs in that picture. I went into overdrive, asking around. Not asking around, that's the wrong way of putting it, because in the countryside, most actually of the landowners really hate people who are nature stewards, who are even Boris Johnson, I think, made some horrible insult, the tree huggers, bunny huggers or whatever. Or was it Cameron? One of them. Anyway, you've got to be careful, but I've been at this a long time. So I went into overdrive. But here, I even asked a woman I kind of vaguely know. In fact, you can, she'd been horse riding with me and her own children a year earlier. Was it a year earlier? No, it was that year, I think. They owned some chicken sheds. I was asking around, does anyone have an incubator? I tried, I took them home and put them under a lamp, but like, does anybody have a professional incubator? Can anyone help? Over a few weeks, I even went to a specific new little shop selling natural seeds in Hereford to ask the woman there, the couple of women, do they know anybody? Basically, no one ever got back to me. Now I know I'm not a horrible person. Why have I done all this? Now, because I know that it's almost impossible to, even when everybody for years has been going on about we love nature. I lived in an area where people who would say we love nature, they came in, they emigrated in there. To actually get anybody to do anything is nigh on impossible. They're just full of bullshit. So what's that got to do with meditation? Let me tell you this. Now, I just happened to be somebody in 2002, I was innocent, nothing to do with me, that the picture of the swan, although this is not deliberate, the picture of the swan almost sum up something to me. In 2002, April, a man came into the life of my daughter. I even hate to say that phrase because it's not correct. I know something. I know one thing that, and BBC Radio 4 Woman's Hour, which is the ultimate kind of many decades long programme about the family and mothering and things like that. They did actually quite a good segment, yes. I know one thing, that I, as a man, I don't think actually this is entirely sex dependent, but I, as a man, I was all right in my 20s, but I was neither at peace, nor did I have much of a moral compass. I don't think I really hurt anybody, thank God, but I was so close. I would drive home after parties in London or whatever, drunk, I would even once or twice get into an aeroplane to fly a little charter when I'd been drinking 4 or 5 hours earlier. Lots of pilots used to do that. In fact, most of them actually. But I knew I had a moral. I did have a moral compass deep down that I'd got from an old countryman called Ralph. I wasn't happy with myself. The one thing that sorted me out was spending 2 years with a woman, and she was pregnant when I met her and had 9-month-old and 18-month-old infants. It just transformed my life entirely. After that moment, I never drove a car over the speed limit ever. In fact, I'm the horrible old person in a pikey van who's driving at 40 miles an hour, even on a clear country road. Never. I never, after that, 1992, getting to love young children, I never have been anywhere near the speed limit, even. Just in case. I don't want to be part of an accident that kills somebody else's children. Now that sounds so bloody pious, but that's me inside. Having kids sorts people out. Woman's Hour did a really good excerpt about 10 years ago, 12 years ago. I have a reference. A man he'd been in jail, and he'd had terrible alcohol and substance abuse issues, and he was saying that miraculously he got to spend a little bit of time with his 4 or 5-year-old, I think it was a daughter. Now, usually, almost always, the courts, the system, the services just don't help, but this one was a bit of a miracle. And he was saying that when he knew his daughter was coming to see him, I think she could only come for maybe an afternoon a week or something. Nevertheless, the 2 or 3 days prior to the daughter coming to see him in his little flat, he'd be really have his act together. He wouldn't drink. He would just be focused on his love and to sort himself out. Now, having kids, I'm afraid to say in Britain, we don't talk about it being the one thing above all that sorts you out. Anyway, let's go into this meditation business now. So I know what sorts you out, but then there's something else. So the menu. For about 10 years, I've been saying to people, so as your Buddhism mind, well, it began with Buddhism and all of these things now. I've studied and lived even in bits of the Far East. They have a lot of cruelty in these societies still. I believe Japan, well, it does have the death sentence, and I think they still use machine gunning people to death. That's a wonderful Buddhist bloody peaceful inner peace way of I know very well, or I knew for a few years, a Japanese woman, and she told me the truth of Japan. It's one of the most judgmental, angsty societies you can imagine, and I was speaking to her a lot around 2020. She was somebody who she was actually she wasn't an activist, but she was a very intelligent woman. After the Kobe nuclear incident, there was radiation that ended up in the food chain, and she cared about this, and she was telling me you weren't even allowed to question whether or not the fish in the local fish market might just have levels of radiation that could be toxic. If you even suggested there was a problem, she told me, you would be ostracized from the community very, very hatefully. I just this kind of Eastern version of Buddhism. But I've no interest. The East can sort itself out. To encounter. Britain was always ahead, but then it's gradually spread into Europe, and it essentially does come from America. California, IA, all of this kind of mindfulness, Buddhism, all of this, and it's just gradually growing and growing and growing. And the next piece in this, I've had to bore myself to death looking at, listening to the Sam Harris, just one of many, but he's the king of the science of meditation. Excuse me, right. I personally, 2002, look at that wings, the swan wings. It's literally the angel of death descended into my own life via a very sad man who happened the mother of my daughter took up with. And ever since then, I knew within a couple of months. I just knew there's a force here, which is, now I don't use the word evil, but it's a very negative force. And that force spent many years trying to destroy me because I represented so openly. I was a parent who was always there for my kid, who spent every single penny I have taking her to see places abroad and having animals for her, etc., etc., etc. He hadn't. He'd ran away from his own children. The definition of which, if he's listening to this, is I don't stick my nose in other people's business, but it just came to be clear over the few years that preceded that, the mother of his children had run away, moved away with his kids, who were a couple of years older than mine, and which she shouldn't have done. That's wrong. But she'd moved basically 4 hours drive away, and a really difficult 4 hours drive, tough, windy roads going up Wales or whatever it was. And so essentially he couldn't see his children very much, but he chose not to move to be near them. Now, I happen to have, no matter whatever, I can't stand Britain. I saw through Britain years ago, but I've stayed in Britain. I've stayed close to my daughter no matter what. Anyway, I had 10 years of about a third of the time due to him pushing legal cases against me, using lawfare to cover up his own inner pain, like I represented something that he wasn't. Nothing to do with me. And then he pushed the thing that ended up so horribly in a courtroom. I mean, it's actually not worth mentioning, but even when my daughter's an adult, using lawfare to play games. In 22 years, I've had 3 periods where I am so hurt. I was so hurt. My daughter was stolen by him in 2010, and rather than use the court system, we actually decided, I was with somebody who had connections, and we decided, right, we're going to use the media this time because they've had £100,000 of public money, for fuck's sake. And the most important, 5 years earlier, 6 years earlier, the most important court finding that this will be forever like this. A week at one house, a week at the other house, share everything, communicate politely. And there was no reason. My daughter was doing absolutely. I went to the school a month earlier, and she was the headmistress and the deputy head said that she was doing absolutely brilliantly in everything. Yeah, they stole my daughter. They stole her. We decided to use the media to publicise this instead. And we even had a top, there was a top, in fact it was with a quite well-known journalist who was all right, called Anna Gazowska, who was a friend of a friend. Well, a friend of... I've got to very quickly finish this. She pulled in a BAFTA-nominated mother, middle-aged mother called Sally George, a filmmaker, to make a film. Why will the system... Because I had to report them to the social services. They've broken a terribly important, established high court solution to a case. You've got to help bring it back to what it was. They refused to even answer the emails, registered letters, etc. So Sally George came up with her cameras and another equal film director woman, mother, putting the camera into the local social services in Brecon. The police knew about it. What on earth is going on? And Anyway, they attacked and took total revenge on me. Blackmailed my girlfriend, so she said. Anyway, let's keep to the point. 3 times in life, 2002 to 4, that period for 3 years. In 2010, I had such grief losing my daughter, who was everything. She was not only, she was everything. My whole life, since she was born, was every moment was arranged around what she needs, what's good for her, etc. For all of 2010, I actually had such grief, lost grief, that I had diarrhea, the shits, all year. In fact, it took me 5 years to kind of get back to, I'd lost her, totally. And I know she was damaged. It took me 5 years to actually get back to full mojo and bodily peace. Fortunately, I never hurt anybody. And yeah, after 2 or 3 years, I sort of started to walk even more and more and more. But I'm going to get to the point. And then a third period of terror. Well, I've actually had 4, yeah. Third period, 2015, 16, 17, due to, well, I'm going to die and I haven't seen my daughter at all. Total, she's a ghost, basically. And then this terrible period in 2018. Right, meditation, inner peace. Now, I'm somebody from all my life, but even when I was in my 20s and had a fairly full young man life, although mine was a bit difficult because most of the time I was abroad, so it was difficult to have an ongoing, ordinary social life, and I suffered because of that. Oh, poor you. Right. Yes, I'm somebody, even in my 20s, I would take myself off. I would drive out of London, go and pitch up in mid Wales in my car, and just sleep in the car for a couple of days in the middle of nowhere in nature. Yes, it does partially provide peace and quietude and mindfulness, although that word should be banned. I know all about that. But guess what? It's never enough. Never. I'm the world expert I spent my teens really in a fantastic wilderness almost, and alone. It's never the answer. 25 years ago, I printed something out that was on the wall of my little office. Effete, the word effete, E-F-F-E-T-E, you'll have to look it up. It basically means no good, complacent or whatever. I didn't know, I kind of knew I just spent my life with ordinary people, but we were effete. I knew that. And then when I encountered the absurdity of the system, the mess of it's a gravy train. All justice became a gravy train. Vested interests. Weirdness. When I encountered that, I realised, yes, I really was a feat. Even though I'd sorted myself out via being around kids, I really was a feat because I never took part. I never got involved. I was too good. I would sit at home and listen to go for walks, go travelling and listen to my lovely Roach's records, all of them. They're magnificent. I was a feat. I knew people who did meditation, all of that stuff. I kind of knew. Something inside of me said, nah. But anyway. All I know in life is this. Now, last night I went to bed. For the last week or two, actually about 2 months, I've been spending a lot of time because I'm inspired by a couple of women who will write a bit about the environment. They're not really doing it yet. No, one of them is, although she unfortunately she's wonderful. She's a tough woman. I can say anything to her. We laugh at everything, but she doesn't live in this country and she lives right up in the Alps, and she's had a bit of a health problem. But anyway, minor. She'll come back to life. Anyway, last night I went to bed knowing I'm waking up today. I have literally only £1 in my life. £1 left. Because I put all my time and energy into, okay, trying to collaborate, rev up, spin them up into, we've got to write some good things that are going to actually cause people to fight a bit. So we'll come back to that word, fight, right? To see through this self-pitying, oh, I've got to have peace, inner peace stuff and fight a bit. I went to bed last night. All day I've been using the damn computer, and that's very rare for me, but it was raining all day yesterday. Horrible. I hate it. I'd had hardly anything to eat. One bowl of pasta last night. I went to bed last night thinking, right, that's it. I do not have any money until my working tax credit comes in 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Not a penny. Not one penny. Nothing to eat. I have nothing to eat. But I went to bed last night feeling absolutely fine and woke up this morning feeling absolutely more than fine. I sleep perfectly, even right at the cliff edge. Now that sounds almost kind of mad masochistic. Right, I've got to finish this now because I've got about 3 hours of work in me left before I get hungry and my brain stops functioning. I've just got a few things to do, including put this up. But here's the point. I'm going to get to the point of this. Now, you're going to have to listen to the next section, right? And I'm not joking. This will save you 10,000 hours and thousands of pounds. I am a person who spends plenty, most of my time, because when you're a fighter, although I'd rather use the word, it's better to use the word, just you're enduring, that's the best word, enduring and then sticking up for your actual rights, your human rights, all of these things, which is nearly impossible in this society because no one else gets it. They go off on tangents. They actually so many times the meditative lot have actually, who do nothing, but if you even say to them, well, I kind of like to battle on behalf of others, even mothers, especially mothers, for justice, they will actually look at you as if you're a danger. It's extraordinary. What the real danger is, you're showing up, unfortunately, although I would never put it in their face, that they do nothing. Anyway, to try and encapsulate this in one thing. Now, I was somebody in my 20s who was above, aside. I had the poetry of the roaches, the nature, the beautiful places where I would roam in me. That was my soul. It never made me complete. It never gave me true peace. Never. Absolute fucking in the abyss for a lot of 2003. And I won the court case, which proved that was all made up or partly made up. Anyway, absolutely in the abyss for certainly 2010, 11, no, for 3 years. I know one thing for certain, even if you can only partly do it. Battling. But the battling has to be kind of slightly dangerous. Oh, I know. That is so not Sam Harris meditative, be at one with the universe. Yeah. No. If that battling, and what does that mean? It doesn't mean going up against the police or going to being an activist in public. It means there's much more dangerous forms of that, where you're saying things where you have of people who seem to be on the same page, and you're slightly goading them, ribbing them, for their own benefit. Come on, step forward. Be part of something, taking part. Take note in this local river being ruined. That is actually more dangerous. In Britain, they'll turn on you and you'll never know they've turned on you. And then you are totally in the desert. Then you have nothing. I've been here many times. I'm there this past week. That's when you're so bleak inside. But guess what? That also is the true meditation, the true taking part, even when it's endless failure, achieving nothing. My whole identity, not only my personal identity, my identity in the community, up until 2010, was loving father. And it was so everybody used to say, your kid is just in a different universe. She's absolutely magnificent, so lovely and engaged and tough, etc. Right, I've got 3 more minutes, okay? That was my identity. And I even did this public work, which I hated. It never did a good thing for me. I lost my identity. That's the bleakest place you can go to. But battling on a bit, that is the one thing that eventually, it can happen. I think you've got to give it 2 or 3 years of battling a bit. Battling against the local business that's ripping people off and not giving them on 0-hour contracts, the environment, all of these things. That eventually gives you, but it's got to be at the cliff edge. And I've forgotten a punchline or two, so you might have to look at the page. Yeah, this is going to have a link at the bottom. Okay, that is what gives you that perfect Zen, that perfect oneness. Last night I slept brilliantly, despite, and so many times I've been here in the last 22 years, being absolutely on the cliff edge of just existence. And it's not something that'll come up. It's not the angels will send me something. I've no idea what it is. Except you can't get it from a menu. You cannot get inner peace from a menu. And the menu, the women, and it was all women, now it's 95% women, the people who put your inner peace on a menu, and then it gradually has started to incorporate sound bowls and all sorts of blah, 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 woo-woo, whatever. I know them. I've lived close by them. I've even worked for them. They do not have inner peace. They're constantly stressed out because they're having to monetize it. Right, I've got to go now. Okay, 58 minutes. Okay? They actually hate me because they see when they've encountered me, and this is going back 20 years, that I have inner peace. Good for me. I always sleep well, right? But you can't get it from a menu. And I do think that a bit of battling on, I do think the key to life is putting your finger up but having a clean fingernail, but also eventually something bigger than yourself comes along and helps you. Your game rises. And the most important thing about your game rising is when you don't want it to. When it's not going to do you one earthly bit of good. I arrived at the place 15 years ago. I want nothing. My life was over. Nothing's going to help me feel good about myself or any achievement. But your game rises, right? That's it. Entirely inadequate, but now it's all in the next chunk, which you'll have to go to my website to look at.